By this point, all of us know about Paddy Pimblett, the up-and-coming star who's left the entire MMA world in shock. But who exactly is the young fighter? How did he suddenly get so famous? Not just that, but why is he one of the most controversial fighters out there at the moment? Let's look deeper into it and discuss some of his most shocking moments. Starting with, who's Paddy Pimblett? Most of us have probably heard about the fighter as a super controversial figure in the MMA world, but there's a lot out there that the average viewer isn't aware of. The fighter has become one of the most exciting in the UK in recent years and mostly fights out of the next generation MMA in the city centre. At 28, the fight defeated Johnny Frachet at the Echo Arena in a Cage Warriors Featherweight Championship title. Patrick Pimblett, or what viewers know him by, Paddy the Baddy, even ended up defending the title once against the American fighter Julian Erosa. However, he did lose it later in March 2017 as he lost to Nad Narimani. Is the fighter really what he's been built up to be? Why is he so controversial, and how did he get so famous out of thin air? One of the biggest reasons he's so controversial is that he isn't afraid to refuse to join the UFC, as he's done several times. It takes a lot of guts, but most people respect him for that, at least most fans. It's the complete opposite with fighters. But how could anyone hate one of the few fighters out there who have such an incredible stage presence, doesn't take himself too seriously, and even gives out most of the money he earns to multiple charities? Though we will admit that the fighter still has a lot to learn, but does also have some incredible potential with him. Moving on, his rise to fame and comparisons to Conor McGregor. Because of the fighter's incredible skill, his undying support for mental health, and overall support for many good progressive causes, he's become one of the most prominent names in the sport, mainly because no one pulls it off quite like him. The fighter has a record of 20-3, at least at the time of making this video, in the pro MMA scene. And because of that, he's being compared to one of the biggest names in the sport there has ever been, Conor McGregor himself. There's a lot in common between both fighters. We'll get to that in a bit, but because of that, he was able to catch the attention of a larger audience from Ireland who was super eager to see him go off against some of the biggest names in the sport. Not only do both combatants have numerous commonalities, but the same fans seem to follow them no matter where they are. Both lightweight fighters excelled in their respective regional circuits and brought that success into Cage Warriors Fighting Championship. Their spectacular performances there resulted in an even larger fan following for each of them. What makes them even more similar is that Paddy isn't afraid to call people out either. No matter the size and shape or status of other fights, we can count on Paddy to always give his most honest thoughts on anything. It's one thing that makes him so controversial, and he isn't just trash talking, he believes in what he's claiming other fighters to be. Next up, Alexis Savaitis. Paddy had already turned into quite a controversial topic by the time the two fighters went against one another, but 2017 was the worst year in Paddy's life, especially since he had just lost his title and was in a bad place mentally. After having such a rough year, the fighter decided to take a break from the sport and fully work on his skill so he could come back stronger than ever this time. Not just that, but now he was determined to win the Cage Warriors Championship and even went as far as to reject what every fighter out there only dreams about, a call to the UFC to get his title back. What was truly shocking about this whole debacle is that when the fighter got back into the ring and went up against Savaitis to get his title back, he seemed to be struggling in the first round, and everyone thought he would lose again. But probably the biggest mistake that a title holder could have made was made by Savaitis, letting Paddy move on to the next round, where in just around half a minute, he was able to submit his opponent to surrender and go for a tap out. What's surprising is that the fighter straight up went for one of the hardest ways to make an opponent submit with an incredibly crazy flying triangle. That shows how fast the fighter can improve, and if he really puts his mind to it, he cannot be beaten. He still thinks he was up against an extraordinary opponent who could have taken him down just the same. Then, Rodrigo Vargas. We can all agree that the fighter is among the most talented young ones out there, but now he's moving on to the big leagues with the UFC. We'll be looking at one of his most recent fights since he joined the promotion. More specifically though, we're going to talk about his second ever fight for the UFC, which was against the Mexican native Rodrigo Vargas, who by no means has the same record as Paddy, but is still an incredible fighter. Another thing we started doing before the fight was trash talking his opponent a lot, even in all the pre-game events. But one of the things he claimed that he would make sure happen happened was that he would win in the first round. When the fight finally started, at first, it seemed like Paddy was going to regret everything he said before the fight, as he was eating fist after fist with a lot of them straight to his face. But in a moment, things turned around completely, and Vargas never saw what hit him. This time, Paddy was in charge and had, out of nowhere, gotten his opponent trapped in a submission, leaving Vargas no other option but to tap out if he wanted to live. The fighter went on his word and took his opponent out in the first round, making him even more terrifying. Similarly, Luigi Vendramini. This is another super interesting fight that went very similarly to the one we mentioned before with Vargas. Paddy had finally made his way into the UFC after rejecting the promotion's offer twice, something that people were stunned over. But it seems like it was the right call, since now he's an unbeatable machine. His opponent didn't say much before the fight, except that if he wins this fight, then all the trash talk that Paddy was doing about him would get him much more fame. And things again seemed to be going down a bad route for Paddy. The fighter was almost taken down by submission after he had taken a lot of blows, and it looked like he was going to lose. But we can never count on Paddy to find a way to come back into the fight at the nick of time and come out victorious. The fighter was in submission when he suddenly turned the table around and released a fury of punches at his opponent, and it was so fierce that the referee had to step in and stop him, ultimately giving the fight to Paddy. The fight left everyone in shock, and the crowd went wild. Not just that, but Paddy won the match of the night as well, because of how he was able to figure things out on the brink of time and get a victory in the first round out of nowhere. This just shows that you can never go out and count Paddy out, no matter what the situation. Moreover, Johnny Frichet. Paddy mentioned before the fight that he wishes that people knew the sport outside of the UFC as well, since there are a lot of incredible fighters out there that don't get the recognition they deserve. We can't say he isn't right about it, since an incredible fighter like him would have been missed out on, despite the Cage Warriors promotion being the biggest one in all of the UK. The fighter went back to Liverpool back in 2016 to win his Cage Warriors featherweight title in what seemed to be an evenly matched fight, but in typical Paddy fashion, things quickly swayed to his side, and he ended up completely dominating his opponent. All it took for Paddy to gain control of the entire match was an incredible flying knee that completely shocked his opponent, followed by an even more deadly hook that brought Frichet down to the ground and gave Paddy a chance to release all hell on his opponent. In just a minute and a half, plus 5 more seconds, the fighter could finish things up and win the belt in what seemed like an instant, but it was a long time for the two people fighting. This match made the fighter explode confidently, bringing serious attention to his craft. The fighter has always had a lot of confidence in his skill, and most of the time, it's almost like he's predicting the outcome instead of just messing around and trash-talking his opponents. Finally, Davide Martinez. Right out of the gate, Paddy came out claiming that he would knock Martinez out in the most casual way imaginable. Is the fighter just overconfident in his ability? Is this going to bring about his demise? This time, the fighter was once against coming back to the MMA scene after taking a whole year off because of the pandemic, with most people thinking that there's no way he still got the same kind of skill. But they'd be wrong to do so, as this fight once again ended in the most Paddy way imaginable. With just a minute on the clock, Paddy threw a high kick, and after that, it was game over for Martinez, with the Liverpool native completely dominating the game and going for one of the most brutal submissions out there. Martinez simply had no choice but to give up. As soon as the match ended, Paddy went over to the camera and addressed Dana White himself to call him onto the UFC. That's a wrap for this video. What are your thoughts about the fighter? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.